Talking about the Jewish quarter within the walls of Jerusalem is no longer a merely innocent urban description or a passing label found in geography books. It has evolved into a fully developed political project aimed at reshaping both memory and place simultaneously. Since the June 1967 war, what took place in Harat al-Sharaf was not simply reconstruction after destruction, but rather a form of forced engineering of history. Palestinian homes were hastily demolished, lands were confiscated, and in their place, a new narrative was installed, one presented to tourists and visitors as the only legitimate truth. Between old maps that reveal the original neighborhoods, Ottoman documents that confirm the Waqf status of Al-Barak, and the bulldozers that crushed hundreds of homes within just a few hours, alongside packaged tourist signage describing the expanded Jewish quarter, we now find ourselves confronting a political myth constructed atop the ruins of reality. In this video, we will delve together into the details of Harat al-Sharaf, from its Arab property ownership before the Nakba, to the bulldozers of 1967, to the manufacturing of the expanded Jewish quarter as an ideological and touristic facade, culminating in Mea Shearim, the neighborhood that is media marketed as the most dangerous in Jerusalem. So stay with us until the end, and don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel to receive all our latest content. The Old City of Jerusalem is not merely a city surrounded by walls. It is a mirror reflecting a long history of religious and civilizational intertwinement. Islamic, Christian, Jewish, and Armenian identities intersect within a single mosaic. Although these four quarters may appear geographically adjacent in a seemingly harmonious layout, each one carries its own distinct memory, bearing witness to a prolonged struggle over sovereignty, identity, and historical narrative. The Muslim quarter is the largest in area and the most densely populated. It is regarded as the beating heart of Jerusalem, as it encompasses Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, forming a spiritual center for the entire Islamic nation, not only in Palestine, but throughout the Islamic world. With its crowded markets and narrow alleyways, this quarter stands as a living testament to the vitality of Jerusalem's Palestinian community and its deep attachment to its holy sites. It is also the quarter most heavily targeted by settlement projects seeking to alter its demographic character. The Christian quarter, by contrast, embodies the spiritual dimension of the Christian world at large. At its center stands the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christians believe Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and resurrected. For this reason, the quarter has become a destination for millions of pilgrims each year and a home to religious traditions deeply rooted in Christian memory since the earliest centuries. It remains one of the most prominent symbols of global Christian identity, tied to Jerusalem as a shared sacred city. The Armenian quarter, meanwhile, is the smallest of the four in terms of area, yet the most distinctive in terms of identity. It is guarded by the Cathedral of St. James, which houses sacred relics and carries immense symbolic significance for the Armenian community that settled in Jerusalem during the early centuries of Christianity. The rights of the Armenians were guaranteed under the Ahd of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, an agreement that continues to be cited as historical evidence of tolerance and the protection of pluralism within the city. As for the Jewish quarter as it is defined today, its story is entirely different. The area promoted as a historic Jewish quarter was, in reality, the Palestinian Harat al-Sharaf, whose residents were forcibly displaced following the occupation of 1967. The occupying authorities demolished Palestinian homes and erased the landmarks of the Moroccan quarter, adjacent to the Al-Barak Wall, replacing them with the contemporary Jewish quarter. This process was not the restoration of history, but rather the manufacturing of a new urban memory designed to entrench a settler narrative that obscures the reality of the indigenous population and transforms the quarter into a touristic facade serving the Zionist project. At the heart of the Old City of Jerusalem, Harat al-Sharaf emerged over the centuries as one of the most ancient Arab quarters of the Old City. Its name was closely associated with the Palestinian al-Sharaf family, which inhabited the area and preserved its Arab and Islamic character generation after generation. Narrow alleyways, mosques, and zawiyas formed an integrated civilizational fabric that reflected an authentic Palestinian presence within the city walls. Until the early 20th century, Jewish property ownership in Harat al-Sharaf remained extremely limited, with Jewish-owned houses accounting for no more than 4% of the total. This fact directly refutes later Zionist claims that sought to portray the quarter as a center of deeply rooted Jewish presence. After the 1948 Nakba, the few Jews who had resided there withdrew, leaving the quarter under Jordanian administration, which continued until 1967. During this period, Palestinian residents maintained their normal lives despite the political crises surrounding the city. However, the 1967 war marked a tragic turning point in the history of the quarter. Within a matter of days, Israeli forces stormed the area and issued evacuation orders. More than 3,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled from their homes, which were then systematically demolished. The objective was not urban improvement or infrastructure development, as the occupation attempted to claim. Rather, the fundamental aim was the reconstruction of Jerusalem's identity through the erasure of an entire Arab neighborhood and its transformation into what is now called the Jewish Quarter. In the southeastern corner of Jerusalem's Old City, in immediate proximity to the Al-Barak Wall, stood for many centuries the Moroccan Quarter, Harat al-Maghariba. This quarter was founded in 1193 CE by Al-Malik al-Afdal, the son of Salah al-Din al-Ayyubi, as an Islamic waqf dedicated to receiving arrivals from the lands of the Maghreb. Over the centuries, the quarter evolved into a fully integrated civilizational landmark. Tightly clustered homes lining narrow, vibrant alleyways alongside the Al-Barak Mosque, the Al-Afdaliyah School, Sufi lodges, and charitable institutions that served both residents and visitors. Harat al-Maghariba thus stood as a powerful symbol of the historical connection between Jerusalem and the Maghreb, and as a prominent feature in Muslim collective memory across generations. However, this deeply rooted heritage did not survive the 1967 setback. Naksa. In a single night, the quarter was reduced to ruins. On the evening of 11th June, less than a week after the occupation of East Jerusalem, residents were shocked by urgent evacuation orders, forcing them to leave their homes within a matter of hours. They were given no adequate time to gather their belongings or bid farewell to houses that had sheltered successive generations. Within a very short time, bulldozers began their work, demolishing more than 138 historic structures, including ancestral family homes, historic mosques, and endowed zawiyas of immeasurable religious and architectural value. Through this act, the Moroccan Quarter was erased from the map, replaced by a vast open plaza designated for Israeli control over the Al-Barak Plaza, which the occupation refers to as the Wailing Wall. The objective of this comprehensive destruction went far beyond merely expanding a space for Jewish worship. It constituted a strategic step aimed at reshaping Jerusalem's urban landscape and erasing an Islamic identity that had been deeply rooted in the city for 8 centuries. The Israeli occupation seeks to present what is today known as the Jewish Quarter in Jerusalem as a natural historical extension of an authentic Jewish presence in the Old City. This portrayal relies on a Zionist narrative that attempts to transform the place into physical evidence of the so-called temple and of an uninterrupted memory stretching back thousands of years. However, historical studies and field research reveal a picture that is entirely at odds with this official narrative. The Palestinian historian Nazmi al-Jubeh explains that the Jewish presence within the Old City was neither deeply rooted nor continuous, as the occupation claims. Rather, it was a sporadic presence that did not become clearly visible until after the 13th century, confined to a limited area later known as the Jewish Quarter. Even then, this presence remained marginal, Jewish residents largely relied on renting homes from Palestinian Muslim and Christian owners, and their actual ownership of property constituted only a very small fraction of the real estate. The figures themselves expose the scale of distortion. Prior to 1948, Jewish ownership did not exceed 0.6% of the total properties in the Old City. This means that what is promoted as broad historical roots is nothing more than an unsubstantiated exaggeration. After the 1967 war, however, the landscape was radically altered through systematic demolition and forced confiscations that affected entire quarters, causing Jewish control of properties to jump to approximately 18%. This increase was not the result of a natural historical progression, but rather of occupation policies imposed by force. The occupation did not stop at confiscating property. It went further by re-engineering the urban space of the area. 3 mosques were demolished, and their sites incorporated into the new Jewish Quarter project, which also included the reconstruction or establishment of 8 synagogues, alongside markets and hospitals that lost their original identity. Through this deliberate transformation, the area of the quarter expanded from only 20 dunams prior to 1967 to approximately 120 dunams, 6 times its original size. Al-Jube also points out that older Jewish synagogues and schools built in earlier periods did not exhibit any distinctive Jewish architectural style. Instead, they were constructed according to the Islamic architectural patterns prevalent in Jerusalem, reflecting architectural integration rather than a deeply rooted demographic presence. Moreover, most of these institutions were not established on land owned by Jews, but rather on rented houses or leased plots. While the occupation attempts to turn the quarter into a tourist destination that reinforces its narrative and conceals the Arab and Islamic past, the reality on the ground remains far clearer. Over 90% of the Old City's residents are still Palestinian, and what remains of the Jewish Quarter's properties is nothing more than the direct outcome of forced displacement and settlement policies. On the outskirts of the Old City of Jerusalem, beyond its historic walls, the neighborhood of Mea Shearim was established in 1874 as one of the first Jewish neighborhoods built outside the Old City. The aim was not to create an ordinary residential area, but rather a closed social space designed to house a deeply religious Haredi community, where daily life is so thoroughly intertwined with religion that separating the two becomes nearly impossible. The streets of Mea Shearim resemble a narrow maze, lined with small shops selling religious books and traditional black clothing. At the entrances, prominent signs stand like warning gates, written in Hebrew, English, and Yiddish, demanding that visitors comply with modesty laws. Long sleeves for women, modest skirts, head coverings, and the avoidance of any display of modern fashion. These restrictions extend beyond clothing to include a strict prohibition on photography and a ban on vehicular traffic on Saturdays, as such acts are considered a direct violation of the sanctity of the Sabbath. This atmosphere has led the neighborhood to be portrayed in both Western and Arab media as one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Jerusalem. Sensational headlines in YouTube, videos, and journalistic narratives have seized upon isolated incidents, such as stone throwing or confrontations with tourists taking photographs, and presented them as if they were the norm. In reality, life inside Mea Shearim is far more complex. The majority of residents live in voluntary isolation, deeply attached to their traditional world, and do not seek confrontation with others so long as outsiders respect the neighborhood's boundaries and social codes. At the heart of Mea Shearim, the closed Haredi neighborhood in Jerusalem, a highly controversial movement emerged known as Neturei Karta, meaning guardians of the city in Aramaic. Unlike other Haredi groups that confine themselves to social isolation, Neturei Karta adopted a radical religious political stance, the outright rejection of the Zionist project at its core. For them, the establishment of the State of Israel before the arrival of the awaited Messiah constitutes a grave religious sin, as the return to the Promised Land, in their belief, must occur not through human will, but by divine decree at the end of time. This ideology has manifested in striking public scenes. While the Israeli flag is raised throughout most of the city, members of Neturei Karta raise the Palestinian flag during their marches and participate in demonstrations against the occupation, placing them in repeated confrontation with Israeli police. Their presence within Mea Shearim serves as a reminder that the neighborhood is not a monolithic, closed block, but rather a mosaic of Haredi currents. Some limit themselves to cultural and social withdrawal, while others, such as Neturei Karta, adopt an openly anti-Zionist political and ideological position, rejecting recognition of the legitimacy of the state. Jewish settlement in Jerusalem did not suddenly begin after 1967. Rather, its roots extend back to the 19th century, where money and ideology intersected in shaping its early foundations. In 1827, the wealthy British Jewish philanthropist Moses Montefiore arrived in Jerusalem and played a prominent role in improving the conditions of poor Jews in the city. By 1856, he had constructed the first shelters outside the old city walls, opening the door to the idea of leaving the old city and establishing new neighborhoods. Later, the thinker Zvi Hirsch Kalischer emerged, calling in his book Seeking Zion for the establishment of a Jewish state through human action rather than waiting for the Messiah. This call paved the way for transforming a religious concept into a political and economic project. This shift found its strongest backing in the Rothschild family, which injected millions of pounds sterling into settlement and agricultural ventures, so much so that it is said they spent more than £6.5 million building the infrastructure of the Zionist dream. Although the Ottoman state later attempted to restrict Jewish land ownership, administrative corruption and bribery opened wide the gates to dubious purchase transactions, granting settlement a false legitimacy through contracts and intermediaries. These deals, later documented as legal ownership, became one of the pillars upon which the Zionist narrative in Jerusalem was constructed, using money and influence to justify a new colonial reality. If the notion of danger in Mea Shearim is reduced to limited social behaviors, such as the rejection of photography or occasional friction with outsiders, the real danger facing Jerusalem goes far beyond these details and reaches into the depths of demographic policy. Here, we are not speaking of a stone thrown in a narrow street, but of a comprehensive population engineering project being implemented on the ground, step by step. In neighborhoods such as Silwan, Jabal al-Mukaber, and Ras al-Amud, scenes of eviction notices are repeatedly reenacted. Palestinian families are forced to leave their homes under the pretext of historical ownership or through politicized court rulings, while these houses are immediately transferred to settler organizations such as Ateret Kohanim. At the same time, new settlements emerge, such as Nov Zion in Jabal al-Mukaber and Ma'ale Zaitim in Ras al-Amud, severing the continuity of the Palestinian urban fabric and imposing a new reality onto the map. Thus, danger is transformed from a matter of social tension into a systematic political project that alters Jerusalem's identity and redraws its demographic and religious boundaries. The struggle here is not over a modesty sign or a tourist's camera, but over the fate of an entire city, being reshaped according to the balances of power and settlement expansion. In conclusion, Jerusalem is not merely a sacred city, it is a battleground over memory and sovereignty. The real danger does not lie in any single neighborhood, but in a settlement project seeking to forcibly reshape the city's landscape, far from the truths of history. And with that, we reach the end of today's video. Don't miss the chance to follow all our latest content. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to stay updated with everything new.